Let the word go
The
forth.
challenge, the opportunity to connect. The 1960s, a time of imagination and change, a time of anger and fear. The 1960s, a pioneering program called Challenge.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
That looked at our connections, our divisions, through the lens of shared values.
With something real.
60 years later, we examine our divisions, our connections, our shared pains and successes in a new program called Challenge 2.0. In last week's edition of Challenge 2.0, we spoke with the author of a new book called The Great Search that documents the sense of many that organized religion has failed them or at least proved inadequate to help them address and navigate the challenges of contemporary life. We're going to, in this edition of Challenge 2.0, continue that conversation. So the faces of our two guests on this program this week are going to be familiar, but both have been on this program before, and we're very pleased that they both agreed to be on this program. The first is John Philip Newell, who is the author of The Great Search, the book that I quoted in the introduction, and we're going to be focusing much of our discussion on that, and also the founder, if you will, of earthandsoul.org. And another familiar face is that of Reverend Dave Brown, a friend who is a Presbyterian minister and also is heavily engaged in interfaith work and has been on this program in that manner a number of times. So John Philip and Dave, thank you so much for agreeing to continue this conversation.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
I think a common point that we hear many people, and I think we feel this personally at times in our given experiences, is when they encounter a tragedy or a series of tragedies or things that they just struggle to understand, they'll say, if there is a God, how could such a God allow this to happen? And JP, in your book, you have I think what could be best described as an icon of an alternative response to that, a young woman named Eddie Hiddleston. Could you introduce us to Eddie and tell us about why you chose to include her and how she relates to that issue?
Yeah. So Etty was a young Jewish woman in the Netherlands. She began to keep a diary around the time of the Nazi invasion of Holland. And very early on, she begins to describe the diary as a type of dialogue with the divine or a dialogue with God. This is the word that she uses to refer to that deepest dimension within her. And it's a pretty extraordinary diary, and also collection of some letters that she wrote over the time of the Nazi occupation of her homeland. And she was eventually murdered by the Nazis at Auschwitz. But one of the most extraordinary things about her diary, as she recounts the suffering of her people and her own journey towards Auschwitz, is the most repeated phrase in her diary is, I believe that life is beautiful and that life is meaningful. And one of the reasons I think that, one of the primary reasons why I think she is able to say that is because she does see the divine at the very heart of her own being, but also at the heart of all being. And she looks for that presence of the divine, even in her so-called enemy. And she sees that the way forward in her own life is to what she calls dig God out again. So we don't have to somehow invoke a transcendent presence. It's a matter of allowing that deepest dimension within us, that of Godness deep within us, to come forth again. And she sees that that is our calling in relationship, even in relationship with our so-called enemy. to see that she is to be attentive to ways in which she can release the divine within the other as well, and sees that as foundational to the way of true transformation. And her diaries so often refer to things like the beauty of the jasmine sort of blossoming just outside her window, or once she's in a concentration camp, looking at the lupins that are sort of growing just outside the fence of the camp, and realizes that this beauty that she's seeing around her, even in the midst of such horrendous suffering, is a beauty that reflects a type of jasmine and beautiful flowering that can happen in her soul, even when she is being deeply mistreated and wronged.
Dave, as we tape this, we are, I say, experiencing perhaps a very difficult morning for many in this country, immediately after the election. I know that you've reflected on this and you see some parallels or some wisdom we can draw out of the story of Eddie and JP's description of her experience to what we're experiencing and likely will experience over the coming months. What would you share with us about that?
Again, we're recording this the day after the election, and the last 3 days, as a pastoral figure in the community, I've been engaged in numerous conversations. I spent some time on the local university campus talking to students about spiritual practices when the world is coming apart. I spent the weekend visiting with a gay couple in another state that were highly anxious about what the move to the right might mean for their safety and the well-being of their family. And I've thought a lot about what can I say to them? And the answer is in detachment and engagement. We need to be engaged in transformation. But we also need, sort of like Eddie was, to be detached from the horror enough to experience the sacred within or the beauty around us. I'm not suggesting, and she in her life did not deny the tragedy and did all that she could do until her life ended to alleviate suffering and make things better for people. But in the midst of it, she found the sacred within and noticed the blossoms on the fence. And so my posture in this time as a pastor in this country is to remind people, as we protect those that are most vulnerable and the people that could really be hurt by some of the talk we're hearing about immigration and rounding people up, as we work hard to remember to nourish our soul and to remember to take that time to feed the spirit. Too often, well-meaning progressive people of faith get involved in activity, in social engagement, and they forget their spiritual core. The church loses the part of the church that should be about JP's great search, and as I've often said, becomes the Democratic Party at prayer. We need to hold those things together. So what I'm telling the students that say, I feel like the world is coming apart all around me, I'm saying, go inside, remember the part of yourself that none of these things will touch.
In both of you talking about Eddie's ability to take inspiration from the beauty of nature, I'm reminded of another person. And JP, I would say this was one of those I thought, I've read this author, and it's wonderful that she's included in the book. And that is Nan Shepherd, your introduction of so many of us to Nan Shepherd. I've read her book, The Living Mountain. Many people end up saying, I don't need to go to church. My church is the outdoors with all the beauty there. How do you think her experience offers some messages to us?
Yeah, yeah. I often think about Nan Shepherd. Eh, I think she would be surprised to find herself in my book as a prophetic voice for the way forward. And and you know, by the end of her life, she wasn't realizing that her voice was going to be so profoundly heard. I mean, I think the prophetic often sort of anticipates a way of seeing and anticipates a time of need that their wisdom can speak into. And this is true not only of Etty, but most of the nine prophetic voices that I draw from. In their own age, they were often seen as way out on the edge, if not heretical. And here these voices are not only out on the edge, but I think they belong to the heart of this moment in time. So I think that uh, Etty is someone who speaks with such passion about her love of Earth, and I think that uh, she really invites us to see the body of Earth the way a lover delights in the body of her beloved. In other words, to see with passion.
Mhm.
And I think it's that passion of love for Earth that is going to be the fire that is required for the demanding work of allowing Earth to truly heal itself.
Mhm.
So I think that Etty finds that sense of passion and interrelationship with Earth. And in that sense, she's providing us with an expression of passionate love that is another way of what so many of the religious mystics and prophets over the centuries have done, and which we in our Christian household should be seeing everything essentially in terms of love. God is love, as Saint John says, and those who live in love live in God, and God lives in them.
Mhm. When we don't have that sense of connection to our planet, to creation, uh, what do we lose? What do we miss out on?
Well, I think to pick up on Nan again, one of her realizations is that it is as she comes to know the soul of the mountain or the soul of Earth,
Mhm.
that is when she comes to more deeply know her own soul. So I mean, we've done this sort of tragic dualism or divorce between humanity and Earth, and I think that one of the features of this moment in time is to see that we are Earthlings, we are of Earth, both spiritually and physically, we're of Earth. So I would say that the extent to which we have fallen out of relationship with the natural world and intimacy of relationship with the natural world is the extent to which we are out of touch with the divine and not knowing a dimension of the divine that is in us,
Mhm.
in Earth.
And also out of touch with us and our essence as part of creation, not over creation. And I think in your last book, you talked a great deal about that. I love Nan Shepherd's image. She talks about going to the mountain, JP, and you write about that in the chapter, and experiencing the traffic of love.
Yeah.
As somebody who hikes on Mount Rainier, at first I wondered if it meant there were so many people on the hiking trails, but that wasn't what she was writing about. She was talking about the traffic or the traveling back and forth between the natural world and then going into her deepest soul.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who had hiked to the Fremont Fire Tower numerous times and has had deep, deep spiritual connections that really almost transcend anything that's ever happened to me in a church building, I fully related to that part of the book. And I think she calls us to pay attention to something when we're so tempted to see the earth as a commodity, as a resource, rather than as a divine expression of the divine, something holy and sacred that tells us in some small way who we are.
Mm-hmm. I think of a couple of things that we covered earlier in both of our combined conversations, and that was how some of these people that you cite in the book and that Dave has talked about are a bit on the margin of their faith traditions. And too often it seems that we lose sight of those. To me, one of the voices that really stood out in terms of that perception that I think we are better able to access as we mature is that of Julian of Norwich. Could you maybe describe a little bit about Julian and why you chose to include her in this, if you will, trail map for us to rediscover our relationship with creation, with the planet, and beyond that, with the divine?
Well, Julian is another one of these very important sacred feminine voices, and one of the reasons why she refers to God as mother as well as father is that she sees us as coming out of the very womb of the divine.
Mm-hmm.
She says very simply but very radically, we are not just made by God, we are made of God. So our essence is of the divine, or comes out of the very womb of God. And one of the reasons why I chose her is because she lived through the worst pandemic that humanity has experienced in the 13th century. So over a number of years, half of the population of Europe died from the plague. So this is a woman who speaks wisdom, and speaks wisdom around wholeness and healing in the context of terrible, terrible suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not sort of armchair theology. So, she is remembered, and many people sort of quote her as saying, all will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well. And sometimes these words are quoted in a way that sounds like a naive optimism.
Mm-hmm.
So when was she speaking these words? She was speaking these words in the midst of terrible suffering and the worst pandemic humanity has experienced. And when we move more deeply into her wisdom and into her vision, I think that one of the things that we see is that all will be well. Not a part is going to be well,
Mm-hmm.
As an exception to the whole, but the wellness will come to us in our lives, in our nations as a human species, to the extent that we seek the wellness of all.
Mm-hmm.
And end this fantasy that has so gripped our nation at times, to think that America can be great, America can be well, and without looking to the wellness of other nations, or that humanity can be well without seeing to the wellness of Earth and Earth's species. or that sort of one segment of society can be well while ignoring the health and education of the whole. So I think that Julian's words are rooted in a wisdom that comes out of suffering, and that provides this important antidote to any notion that I can be well by looking after myself. And she is encouraging us to seek wellness in terms of our interrelationship instead of our separations.
Dave, what would you want to leave people with? What would be your observations in line with the Great Search?
I think there's a real hunger right now for meaning and purpose, and for a place to ask questions about, why am I here? Where is this going? What am I leaving either my children or my friends' children? And I guess one of the things I'd like to leave with is to invite people to find a place, to find soul friends, to use a Celtic phrase, with whom they can explore those questions that matter. The decline of our church means that often congregations become social clubs or activist centers, and there's a place for that. But find a place where you can ask the questions that are on your heart. Secondly, I think I'd invite people, and it's a funny word to some, especially younger people, to consider embracing a spiritual discipline. We go to gyms, we take our walks. What is it that you can intentionally do in your lifestyle on a regular basis to nourish your inner spirit, to remind you that you are embraced by Creator Spirit, as the poem says? So I guess, find a place, then find a discipline. I think Christianity in America, and I next time JP and I are together in person, I want to explore how it may be different in the UK. I mean, I think right now there's a strong cultural Christianity. In our political reality, there's all these articles being written about what Christianity is going to be like under a Trump administration. Part of me thinks that's cultural identity and has nothing to do with spiritual path. And to leaders in the church, and this will be my last word, I would do my best to help people see that cultural identity is not the same as spiritual path. Seeking political power is not the same as seeking to fall back into the mystery behind all reality. And to help people see the Christian household not as political agenda, but as a place to fall into that which is more.
Thank you, Dave. JP, I would leave it to you to conclude and have the last word on this.
So I think what I would want to say is that in this time of transition, and in this time when fundamentalism is rearing its head out of fear of change, I would say something new is trying to be born. Human spirit. And this is a time that for me is exciting and challenging like no other moment in time. And I think we're being invited for this moment and for Earth and for the human journey to dig deep into our spiritual inheritance and find wisdom that I believe can be part of our resurrection.
Well, there is so much more that we could talk about, but I would encourage everyone to go to your website. First of all, earthandsoul.org. There is a great deal of valuable material there. Of course, you do retreats and that sort of thing. And some of your prior books, Dave referred to that. And again, your current book, The Great Search, I'd heartily recommend people get that. I would thank both of you John Philip and Dave, for being a part of this conversation and for being what you are in the world, shining a bit of a light in which we don't have enough light. So thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And at the heart of good conversation is someone who knows profound questions to ask. So well done to you.
Thank you very much. I'll hope the day comes when maybe we can get together in Scotland sometime.
Oh, absolutely. Come to Iona.
And Jeff, thank you for your dedication to this form of outreach and this kind of stimulation. I know you very well, and you work very hard at it, and it is appreciated. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you, all of you that have been tuning in for this, either on the television program or the podcast version. And we hope that, inspired by this, that you'll join us again on the next edition of Challenge 2.0. Thank you very much. If you've enjoyed this program, found the conversations informative, interesting, and thought-provoking, and the visions of people from different backgrounds, faiths, or wisdom traditions inspiring, people who can disagree without being disagreeable and respect the essential human dignity of all, perhaps consider supporting our organization with a contribution. Your donation will not only support this program, but also the broader work of our nonprofit charitable organization, Paths to Understanding. Thank you.